Tell us about the situation for you when this magnitude 8.9 hit.
Well, it was absolutely unlike anything I've ever experienced before. I've been living here for 8 years now, and this was quite simply the biggest, longest-lasting earthquake I've ever experienced here.
And that's it, because Kyung La, our reporter there, was saying that she thought it was 4 to 5 minutes. Was that your sense as well?
Oh, yes, the ground was rolling for an extended period of time. I wasn't exactly sure what to do or where to go. I'd never been prepared for anything like this. My wife and I stood outside and basically held on to the outside of our house. You couldn't even stand up. I mean, literally at the peak of these waves that were washing over the ground, you literally could not stay on your feet. You had to kind of crouch down in a ball or put your back against something so you didn't fall. And that's exactly what we did for the length of the duration of it, which I would say was about probably a minute to 2 minutes. It felt like a lot longer than that, let me tell you.
Indeed. And are you saying that you live there, or that you're actually traveling there?
I actually live here. I've lived here for the last 8 years, and I live on the west side of the city in a little section of Tokyo called Kichijoji. And yes, there are earthquakes from time to time, but we have never, ever felt anything on the magnitude, the literal magnitude of what we experience today.
And that's exactly the story we hear. Now, Matt, as we are talking, we are looking at this extraordinary wave, another tsunami wave, moving toward the Japanese coast. And where are you located? Are you away from any threat of tsunami coming ashore?
Yes, we're very fortunate to be located quite far inland. Of course, there's some rivers and streams around here, but those aren't being affected by the tsunami. We're kind of, I would say, a good 10 to 15 miles away from the coastline, so we don't have to really worry about that where we are. But with the footage that we're seeing, the video that we're seeing on the television screens is just, it's absolutely, it's heart-wrenching, actually, because you know that probably a lot of those people did not have a chance to evacuate before the wave hit, even though they were telling people, you need to get away from the shorelines, you need to get away from the water. Just watching this wave hit and cars and buildings and houses being swept away in it, I think we're going to see a significant number of casualties, especially up in the northern part of the country where the quake was epicentered.
And as you mentioned, you've been there for a number of years. I do have to apologize because someone was actually talking in my ear when you mentioned the number of years that you've been there. How long did you say you'd been there?
I've been here for 8 years. My wife is Japanese, and she's lived here most of her life. And I can tell you, this was something neither of us we were completely unprepared for this. It was a beautiful spring day. It was sunny outside. I had just come home from a little errand to the grocery store, and all of a sudden, bam! It just hit, and you could tell this was different instantly from other little tremors that we've had before. I mean, it just picked up in intensity. It ramped up. The gentle shaking, and things started coming off the shelves, things started falling off our desks, and you could hear this strange, eerie creaking sound of all of the buildings all around us as they were kind of shaken by this, by the tremor of the ground. And it was something I hope I never have to hear again, but unfortunately we keep getting aftershocks. We've had 3 or 4 so far, and there's probably going to be other ones as well.
And the reality is, I mean, living in Japan, this is something that you're very used to. But as you say, and of course, as people who've lived there all their lives, they know when this is different. And this felt very different.
It absolutely did. I think this is going to be a tremor to remember, so to speak. And I think people are going to be talking about this for a long time to come, because really, Tokyo hasn't seen anything like this in decades. Now, more than half a century.
Indeed.
Easily.
And Matt, you mentioned your wife is Japanese, so for her, presumably,
yes.
When this quake hit, she was no doubt a little calmer, perhaps, than you were, because she would be used to this situation. What did she say to you?
Absolutely. Well, what the first thing she said was to open up all of the doors and the windows, just in case. Japanese people have been trained for this sort of contingency ever since they were children, because it's just such an earthquake-prone country. The first thing she said was leave the windows and doors open, because just in case the building shifts, you don't want to get trapped when the doors get caught in their door jambs. And then we also brought our shoes in the house with us, which is something that in Japan you never do. You never bring your shoes in with you. But we brought them inside because just in case that there was broken glass or something like that, to be able to get out. And then she was the one who said, get down on the ground, get down in a corner, put your back against something, and wait for the tremors to subside before trying to stand up and walk around so you don't hit your head. So yeah, she was the cool cool-headed voice of reason during this. I was pretty much running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
The calming influence of a wife, it's very much needed, certainly in a situation like this. So, I mean, as we speak, we are continuing to look at these aerial shots, and we saw that gigantic wave heading again toward the coast. We've probably witnessed in live TV, and all of our global audience and people in the US have witnessed this. We've watched it unfold, which I can't remember a situation where this ever occurred, where you actually see this unfold. And of course, Japan and the journalists there are used to covering these sorts of things. They have their cameras trained on all of these critical shots, like the tsunami waves coming to shore. I don't know if you can talk to some of the pictures we saw a little earlier, but we saw all of this mud and debris with boats and cars moving across a farm area. Now, I don't know if you were able to talk to that at all, but what could you say and tell us about that?
Well, the earthquake, the epicenter of the earthquake, insofar as I understand it, was in a prefecture called Iwate, which is several hundred kilometers north of Tokyo. And I think the footage that we are seeing largely of these waves of debris, it's almost like a monster movie. Just seeing this stuff wiping out entire sections of the coastline is all generally from that area. Also, Hokkaido, the northernmost island of Japan, is taking a major hit. And we've been seeing a lot of footage of water washing over farmland and other places that are near to the coastline. And there's even been some really heart-wrenching footage of cars racing away from the water. Unfortunately, we don't know if those people made it away or not, but just watching it, it really is almost, it's terrifying. It is really terrifying. And we're getting scattered reports throughout.
Please go on. I mean, I just wanted to make the point. That's what's disturbing about covering this too, because as we look at these pictures, we must not forget that there are people there on the ground when these waves of mud and debris sweep over the land. And this is a big problem. We don't know the casualties at this point, but of course that we will learn a little later, maybe perhaps even hours from now. But Matt, going back to your description, because it's quite extraordinary what you're able to reveal to us as we cover this story.
Well, immediately after the first tremor subsided, we turned on the TV because all of the channels will immediately switch to earthquake coverage, official earthquake coverage, when something like this happens. And so everybody was told, you could hear on all the TVs, and they were making announcements on the street over loudspeakers to get away, to evacuate if you're anywhere near water, if you're anywhere near that sort of area, to get away from it. And it is, there were several minutes before the water actually hit. They can predict it with very, very high degree of accuracy. And so there is a good hope, at least I hope, that many of the people who are watching TV and heard about this and know about tsunamis from living in that area were able to evacuate the shorelines. But you can't tell, and when you see things like cars being swept away in the water, is there somebody in there? I mean, that's something certainly that is weighing on all of our minds right now.
And something that struck me, Matt, when I was talking to our reporter Kyung La in Tokyo, was the time, the delay between the earthquake hitting and the final decision to evacuate people from an underground area, from the subways there, which I found striking. Anywhere else, there wouldn't necessarily be that delay and you would move very quickly. Is that because people are so used to earthquakes hitting that it takes them a little while to assess whether this is a deadly one and they need to move quickly?
I think absolutely that Japanese people are more attuned to earthquakes. They're more used to it certainly than I was, where I grew up on the east coast of the United States, where we don't have much in the way of earthquakes. And they tend to take it in stride a little bit more. But this was larger than anyone expected. It went on for longer than anyone expected. And I think there's also a high degree of self-sufficiency among people here, especially with regards to earthquakes. Just as my wife showed, where she was cool-headed and had all of these techniques for dealing with an earthquake hitting. I'm sure that even long before an official announcement to evacuate, people who felt these sort of tremors would absolutely have some sense of what to do and begin to leave the areas. The real danger right now, I believe, is the tsunamis that are hitting. I'm looking at footage right now of Sendai Airport up north, which has been completely inundated. It's completely underwater right now. All of the runways and the buildings are filling with water from what I can see on TV. So this is a major, major, major hit to Japan's infrastructure. I haven't heard anything about what's going on with the subways or anything downtown. I know that they are prone in some cases to being filled with water in the event of a tsunami hitting, but I haven't heard any reports of that. But certainly up north, and all of the coastal areas are taking a major, major hit right now.
And Matt, of course, we know, as we've discussed, that the Japanese are very used to these earthquakes. The cities are built to withstand major earthquakes. But what sort of measures are in place to deal with tsunamis on the ground there?
Well, there's actually quite a few. Most places that are tsunami prone, most of the cities have large walls that are built around them. The townships, even small places, have large floodgates and things like that. Tokyo has an extremely elaborate system of floodgates that are used to divert tsunami waters. So I think there's actually a high chance that there's going to be less casualties than there might otherwise be in places that don't have these sorts of measures in place. But Japan has known about the threat of tsunamis for a very, very long time. And there's almost no case that I can think of where a coastal city is not behind some kind of wall or built atop some kind of abutment to bring it far higher than the level of sea level. But that's what's precisely so frightening about these photos, because the waters look to be overwhelming a lot of these measures that have been put in place. And I don't think this is any kind of statement about ill preparedness. I think it's just a testament to how powerful this earthquake was and how powerful the tsunami is. That is, it's hitting Japan even as we speak on the phone right now.
Indeed. I mean, this is unfolding before our very eyes. And as we talk the audience through this, and of course we're looking at these pictures now from the airport where people have gone to the highest ground they can possibly find. And of course water surrounds them at the base there. And as you mentioned, presumably that area where the water is sweeping under is a measure in place to ensure that when these tsunamis hit, the water can actually clear the area. But of course the problem is for anyone who unfortunately was on the ground at the time. And of course, Matt, we talk about how, you know, hopefully casualties will be low. We keep comparing this to the quake back in 2004 that particularly affected Indonesia, the one in the Indian Ocean. Of course, the difference here, as you point out, the structures. And we're just going to pause. And Matt, I want you to stay there if you wouldn't mind.
Yep.
We're going to pause just for a moment to listen in to NHK coverage.
Chiba Prefecture lies right north of Tokyo, and you can see an inferno, fire breaking out, and large fire breaking out on the oil refinery in Chiba Prefecture. Black smoke seen billowing from the refinery. And it looks like firefighters are having an almost impossible situation to be able to control that at this time. A large fire breaking out of an oil refinery in Chiba Prefecture. And that fire does not look like it's going to be going out anytime soon. Obviously, we are reporting this as we see things and as information starts coming into our newsroom. Things fluid, developing as we speak. Several fires have broken out in Tokyo as well. The fire department says fires have been reported in several places, including Ariake in central Tokyo. That is the area where it has been reclaimed land along the coastal areas. Right now you're seeing fire breaking out at an oil refinery in Chiba Prefecture in Ichihara area. Chiba, northeast of Tokyo. Our helicopters also at Miyagi Prefecture covering live the Sendai area where obviously a large tsunami has hit an area engulfing big parts of the city. The tsunami had moved upstream quickly. It's engulfed the area. You're seeing live footage from our helicopters up in Miyagi Prefecture in the Sendai area where a large tsunami has engulfed farmland, homes, cars, but we do not know the number of casualties at this time. A major earthquake hit Japan on Friday afternoon about an hour and 40 minutes ago. The magnitude was 8.4, one of the largest earthquakes ever to happen in Japan. The agency has issued a tsunami warning for Japan's Pacific